What happens when we combine the relationship building elements of partnerships with the scalability of modern marketing teams? You get trust that scales with measurable impact. This is what Tyler Calder is seeing. He's CMO at PartnerStack, and he lives at this intersection between partnerships and marketing because he's a marketing leader at a SaaS company that provides a partner ecosystem platform to other B2B brands. He's seeing some new trends emerge between these two typically siloed departments. You see, marketing teams are realizing they can leverage the historical motions of partner programs and a near-bound approach to build trust and do better marketing. Partnership leaders are starting to see where they can work with the marketing team to measure and iterate on campaigns, get access to budget, and change the conversation with their leadership teams. Let's dive into today's episode as Tyler explains how this current trend mirrors a similar shift that marketing underwent about 15 years back. Welcome back to Marketing Together. I'm Logan Lyles, Head of Partnerships at Teamwork. I'm joined today by Tyler Calder, CMO at PartnerStack. Tyler, welcome to Marketing Together. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome, man. Well, we're going to be talking about a shift that you've been noticing. You are a marketing leader at a SaaS company who provides a platform primarily to the partnerships department. So you're living at that intersection of marketing and partnerships, but that intersection has started to feel a little bit different. You feel a shift where these two historically separate, maybe siloed functions intersect. What is that shift that you've been noticing? Like, what are some of the signals that you've been seeing in the market that something's going on here?
I'm going to age myself. If we go back, call it 15 years or so. 15 years ago, marketing was going through this transformation of, marketing is this thing that is hard to measure. It is about the idea. It's about creativity. It is about building awareness and getting in front of as many eyeballs as possible. And, around that time, digital was starting to take off, right? And now everything was measurable. And everything could be tied to revenue. And a lot of the conversations I hear now with partnerships are the same ones that happened 15 years ago with marketing. How do I get a seat at the revenue table? How do I get the attention of my CEO? How do I get budget from the CFO? And what I'm seeing is the companies that are successful in getting there, there being a seat at the revenue table, having the attention of their board, right? How do we elevate partnerships to a board level conversation? They're just having a revenue-led conversation, right? That transformation that happened to marketing where it's like, you know what? We are going to get really diligent and very deliberate about talking about the impact we're having on pipeline, on revenue, on profitability. Like, we're going to have more of a financial conversation than we are a marketing conversation. The people that I see succeeding in partnerships right now, they're doing that. And the interesting thing that I see is some of those are marketing people grabbing partnership budget, right? So they're sitting in the marketing seat and they're like, hey, I think there's something here with this partnerships thing. I don't see my partnership team doing it. So I'm going to go after it. And they're getting the budget. And now all of a sudden they find themselves in a partnerships role. So that's kind of a little bit of what I see happening. And again, there's, a lot of words that we can assign to it. I'm partial to keeping things pretty simple, right? We're talking about partner-led being really just revenue-led in our thinking. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'll pause there. Because that's the shift, right? And it was a pretty big shift for marketing, and I see it being a pretty big shift for partnerships 15 years later.
Yeah, I can remember that. I came out of college in 2008, great time to hit the job market. I hit it with a journalism degree of all things, as we were not only in the midst of the Great Recession, but also that industry just going through all sorts of disruption, contraction, to say the very least. Tell me a little bit, I think you did a really good job of kind of drawing the parallel between where partnerships and marketing are intersecting and the shift between those as it relates to the shift in marketing in 06, 07, 08. Why do you think that shift is happening now as it did back then? Is it the talk of the down economy? Is it talk of the tighter times, layoffs, those sorts of things, that it needs to be revenue-led in order to have a seat at the table in good times or bad, but obviously, especially when things aren't at least as good as they were a year or 2 years ago?
It's sort of a perfect storm right now, right? And what I mean by that is you have your big ad networks, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn. I think everybody is struggling a little bit with the quarter over quarter increase in costs that you're seeing there. Those channels have been inundated. If anybody has read the article, and you can Google it if you haven't, just the law of shitty click-through rates. I think it's a great one to read. But you're kind of seeing that across just about every digital channel that exists. And then on the organic side of these channels, and you just saw with LinkedIn, right? Algorithms change, algorithms shift. And so there's a lot of, I'll start with marketers, a lot of marketers who, they have one channel. They're a single channel marketing team. We drive growth through paid ads. We drive growth through LinkedIn organic, whatever it might be. But really, you're kind of at the mercy of the algorithm. And I think marketers are at the point where, certainly over the past 5 years or so, it's really about diversification. So that's kind of on the marketing side. And that's one of the changes, is like we've just realized that we've kind of hit peak social network for our growth channels. And certainly I'm not suggesting we're not there, right? Still a ton of value, but we need to diversify a little bit. You have that. You obviously have the economy, right? Money isn't free anymore. Money's a little bit more expensive. And that's translating into demands from your investors, your board. You got to be more efficient. You got to run this thing like it's a business, right? Let's be honest. The tech world especially was a little bit of la la land.
Well, when you celebrate, funding rounds more than you celebrate actual revenue, it's like, how much are we celebrating debt over actual, making money?
Yeah, right. And, I remember being agency side, we worked with a lot of high growth companies, and it was, if you spend $1 and I make 25 cents, that's fine. Like, let's just keep pumping money into it. And I always remember thinking, it's like, I'm not convinced that this is how businesses operate. And so you're starting to see that. It's like, this is a test of what's real and what's not, who can actually run a business on sound fundamentals. So you have that pressure. And then you have people realizing partnerships is this really interesting group that a lot of companies have ignored. But now that we're forced to look at all of our data, right? Every company is like, okay, we really need to look at where are we spending money? Where are we seeing a return? All of these companies are starting to realize, wow, look at what the hell partnerships is doing. Like they're driving leads that are half the cost of our direct motion. They're closing them faster. They're coming in at a higher contract value. They're stickier. Like, why aren't we just investing more there? Now, in a lot of cases, the volume isn't there, right? Maybe it's only doing 20, 30% of what your direct motion is doing. But all of the efficiency metrics are just absolutely destroying what you see on the direct side. So now you start to have these conversations of partnerships people. Candidly, what I've seen, this is a generalization, but my comment earlier of struggling to get budget. And it's because they're sitting on this mountain of data that proves that this motion is working, but they don't necessarily know how to translate that into a business case for doubling their budget, tripling their budget. You have the marketing people who figured that out a decade ago. And so now what I'm seeing is when you really get the marketing people and the partnerships people talking and you kind of pair them together, now you really start to create this revenue engine that, at least for a period of time, can probably, that alone, be your competitive moat.
I love what you said there, and I hadn't necessarily even connected those two dots in the way that you said it, Tyler. That we've heard the stats, right, of the higher deal value, of the higher retention rate, of the higher closing percentage of partner sourced and even partner attached deals. But you pointed out something I've even experienced in my short term in a partnerships role but it's not at the same volume, right? When you compare the efficiency metrics that we know and have seen in partnerships, which then what has marketing historically been good at, right? Scaling things, right? When I came out of college, I was always working in local, regional B2B sales, where I was intrigued by where B2B and content marketing was going, because it's like you could scale these things because of the power of content and how you can take one thing and communicate that in mass. And so it's interesting to me as we opened up talking about the intersection of partnerships and marketing, maybe that's one of the key intersections we should be looking at, is pairing the efficiency metrics with the scalability and repeatability of what we can do with marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that. And I'll share an example. So there's two examples that come to mind, and I probably can't share what the companies are, but they both did something really similar. So one of the companies has one individual managing what I believe is well over 5,000 affiliates. They're B2B, very successful. It's their paid search person that's managing it. So their paid search person, to your point of understanding scale, understanding experimentation, and I live this in the agency world, right? Like I might start with a $500 a month budget with a customer, and you just keep testing, and now we're at $500,000 a month. This company had this pay-per-click specialist, relatively junior, but incredibly smart, incredibly focused on growth, incredibly focused on understanding what the entire funnel looked like, and saw this potential to scale the affiliate program from, a few dozen affiliates, and basically applied everything he had learned from managing paid search to the affiliate program. Now it's their biggest channel. It's well over 5,000 affiliates. And it was a simple application of, hey, here's everything I learned on this side of the house in marketing. I'm going to apply it over here, which I thought was really, really interesting. And the other example is similar. Another company where partnerships was struggling to, again, get budget and get the budget to continue to scale and test. And when you unpack why they were struggling and why all of a sudden there was an individual that came along and was successful in getting the budget, they flipped the conversation. So the partnerships conversation was, listen, we all know partnerships takes time. It's about relationship building. We got to make these big bets. And, it might take us 12, 18 months to really see this come to fruition. That's a super easy thing for a CFO to say no to, especially in this environment, right? Like that's an incredibly easy thing to say no to. The marketing person comes along and says, hey, listen, I want to run a series of experiments. And I'm going to have this like red light, green light approach to these experiments. If we hit certain targets, green light, we're going to keep going. Red light, we'll stop. Cool. The way he approached it was that, and then pairing it with, okay, here is our cost to acquire a lead and a cost to acquire a customer across every channel we're running. Partnerships right now, low volume, but like we talked about, most efficient. This is where I want to try to scale. Because if I can scale this and we maintain even a fraction of our efficiency metrics, I'm still blowing everything else out of the water. So the framing was different. The framing wasn't like, I need budget because this thing is going to take a long time. It was, I need budget because I want to run a series of sprints to really experiment. And I'm going to show you what the potential upside is by comparing the current CAC to all of our other channels.
Yeah.
So there's like a framing thing there plus a data thing that I think is important. And now the two teams are working really closely together, right? It's marketing and partnerships. Like they're in this together, and they're both kind of grateful for each other, which is great. It's this beautiful thing.
You've got my mind spinning, because the moment you said, hey, a paid media specialist is actually working with some partners managed probably in PartnerStack. If you know of them, they're probably a PartnerStack customer. At Teamwork, we're a PartnerStack customer. And I literally, one of the first things I realized, we were a customer before I joined. We're like, hey, we have these over here, and we kind of expanded our use into our new solution partner motion, those sorts of things. But we had a legacy affiliate program. One of the first things I learned is, hey, we have a paid media specialist from our growth and acquisition team who's got his hands in this and working with a few key affiliate partners too. So like, just from what you were saying, I was like, oh, they're like, we're already, dabbling there a little bit. Maybe there is some more experimentation or more that we could double down on. Any other things that you'd call out from either those examples or other conversations you're having, Tyler, of like the types of motions where, those sorts of experiments are really making sense? Like what were some of the criteria? Because obviously like scaling, paid acquisition tests through affiliate partners might not be the only thing, or might work better if certain deal size, certain motion, certain industry, that sort of stuff.
So many different types of partners you can have, right? Like and affiliate types of partners are probably the easiest to test and experiment with, right? Because there is a certain level of scale that you can achieve. I think incentives are very aligned when you look at affiliate, right? And the alignment of incentives being, I'm a vendor, I want to drive leads, I want to build pipeline, I want to drive revenue. Affiliate, I want to make as much money as I can. And if you give me a path to do that through a great reward structure, you have a great brand, whatever it might be, like, let's get in this together. Like, it is purely like a performance numbers driven thing. So that's kind of easy to test in my mind. But then when you get into other types of partners, whether you're working with agency partners, integration partners, solution partners, whatever they might be, all of a sudden, a lot of what I hear is like, well, like, this is different. This isn't, these aren't affiliates. This is about the long game. This is about the relationship. And not wrong. Completely agreed, right? Like, the incentive of an agency isn't all about money, right? It is about bringing value to your customers and making them stickier and all of that.
And it might be about money in other areas, right? They might care about the rev share, the partner commission to a degree, but their bread is buttered on the service revenue. So that's still a high priority, but it's not the same priority as with, say, affiliates, right?
100%. But what I find is, because of that, all of a sudden we say, well, it's not testable, right? It's different, right? There's not a whole lot that we can do here. And so where I'm going with this is, I just start with challenging a lot of what I hear as the general thinking, right? The general thinking of, to your point, I hear a lot of our partners don't actually care about money. It's like, are you sure though? Like, maybe they just care about getting that money in a different way. What does that look like? You should probably unpack that with them. I hear, it takes a long time to stand up these relationships, these partnerships. It's like, what if it didn't though? Like, what if you went through a thought exercise of, I only got 60 days, 90 days to make this thing work. And I'm not suggesting that it will, but I think forcing ourselves to just work through these thought exercises that challenge a lot of the paradigms that I see us living in. We're partners and we're going to co-market together. Well, let's not just end it there. Let's talk together about, okay, what does good look like? Why don't we run in a sprint together? Why don't we really figure out how we can hone this thing in? Like, okay, we're going to do a series of webinars together. How might we test that, right? How might we test the type of content we bring to the table? How might we test the distribution channels we're promoting it through? Like, I think there's just challenge yourself to think about where might you test some of this. And so for us, some of this is very simple, right? We did a lot of co-marketing with integration partners, with solution partners, like partners where seemingly it might take a little bit of time to see some success with these types of partnerships. And when you get into it, sometimes it doesn't, right? Like, there's great tools out there like a Reveal. Like, let's just get into having a little bit more of a sales conversation, a co-sell conversation of, like, right out of the gate, before we even get like any integrations or anything done, where might we start? Like, do we have anybody that we can introduce each other to? Can we jump on the horn with somebody? Like, there's so many tools out there that you can just get going a little bit faster, show traction a little bit faster. So, like, simple stuff like that. And then, like, the relationship that we have with the Partner Hacker folks, Jared, Isaac, the relationships we have with folks like Reveal, a lot of that came out of our own testing and experimentation, right? It's like, what does this look like if we don't just go to market alone, but we go to market with somebody who has the attention of the folks that we want the attention of and all that stuff. And, for us, what you found was, it's better. It's as simple as that. More leads, higher close rate, all that fun stuff.
Coming back to those efficiency metrics, no, you're touching right on those. And, you touched on a few things there, Tyler, like that, challenging the assumption that it always has to take a long time, challenging the assumption that it can't be trackable, and with some advice that I've heard from other folks, like previous episode on the show, we'll link to it in the show notes, Jen Spencer at SmartBug, She's been involved in a lot of partner marketing, a lot of co-marketing, both on the SaaS side and from the agency side. And one of the things she said was understand what you're going to try and test, right? Oftentimes we approach a partner, let's do some co-marketing. Oh, that didn't work. Well, did you really test it kind of scientifically or even methodically? Was it a new thing that neither of you had ever done before? So maybe it was the channel or the delivery. One of the things I heard you say there too, Tyler, was like you can start small. You can either start co-selling or you can start co-marketing a little bit. But I've even seen marketing teams where something goes really well, and maybe it's an influencer in your niche, and you bring them onto your webinar, and it goes great. Well, guess what we do? Who's going to be the speaker on next month's webinar? And you start looking around again, as opposed to how can we double down on that? Like, how can we create a campaign out of clips out of that? Because we got a really good, like, we just pat ourselves on the back, like got a bunch of leads, show rate was good, all that sort of stuff. And then we just move on to the next thing, as opposed to like, that's a signal that we could double down there. And I think that is where the partnerships mentality or lens needs to come into a lot of marketing teams. You've been in marketing for longer than me, candidly. Like, am I off the rails there? Is that kind of anecdotal for me, or do you think that that's true in a lot of teams?
Definitely true, 100%. It's kind of, ad hoc co-marketing, right? Random, you'll hear people say random acts of marketing. You see a lot of random acts of partner marketing. And you're bang on. It is this mentality of what's working, let's double down on it. What's not working, let's cut it. And I think on the partnership side, the cutting is really difficult because there's oftentimes a relationship there. So what I see is marketing is actually pretty good at this idea of no emotion. Like it's not working, it is gone. Cut it. Let's double down on this thing. So to your point, you bring in a partner, it goes really, really well. How do we lean into that? How do we do more there? How big can this thing get? Like, what is the universe of possibility? So, I always go back to what are these thought exercises? That's one of them. It's like, how big can this thing be? And let's get at it. And I think that applies here. The difficult part that I would call out is it sometimes kind of feels a little bit icky when it's a partner that you're saying like, you know what, we've tried this a few times, it's not working that well. I think we're gonna cut it. It's okay to double down on the stuff that's working, even if it ends up being with a handful of partners and you feel like potentially maybe you're ignoring some of the others. Like you gotta make bets with finite resources. And I find that's challenging when, people you care about are involved.
Yeah. And, I was talking to Jared the other day, and he was saying he hears a lot of partnership people, complain about, 20% of our partners are, responsible for 80% of our revenue. And it's like, no, that's the Pareto principle. That just is that, lean into that and understand that. And that's echoed in what you're saying there. Like, it's okay that you have this 20% of your solution partners, agency partners, affiliates, strategic co-marketing partners, whatever the case is, that, you shouldn't just spread 100% of your effort across, the 100% where 80% isn't giving you anything back, or at least not that much. Like, that's okay. That's business. As you and I were talking offline, Tyler, you mentioned at PartnerStack, you guys are starting to have more conversations about leveraging a partnership approach, leveraging, different tools that have historically sat in the partnerships department, obviously your platform being one of those. But I guess if there's anything that we haven't covered yet, that in those conversations with marketing folks where they're either pulling budget from partnership or they're in a good way, right? Not stealing it, but like getting budget for them by looping it into marketing, what's got them kind of leaning forward? What are some of the motions that they're like, I hadn't really thought of that. Like, that is a way that we could approach our marketing differently, get some budget together between partnerships and marketing, and do some different sort of marketing that rolls into everything we're talking about here.
So one of them we've already talked about, which is this idea of affiliate. I think affiliate, just as a word, has a lot of negative connotations to it, which is fair. Like I was an affiliate in university. That's how I paid my way through university, was selling like ringtones when people used to pay for ringtones, right?
Selling ringtones. Oh, we're really dating ourselves now, Tyler. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, we're getting there. Poker chips, right? I was big into like poker chips and all that stuff. And so, I get it because, back then I was a university kid making money and, I could care less about the brand I was promoting. I didn't care at all. And so this negative connotation of like, you don't necessarily know who these affiliates are, might be damaging to the brand. Understand all of that and certainly understand where it's coming from. But saying no to affiliate, which I see so many partnerships people do, so many marketing people do, is coming from a place of fear. Like it's coming from a place of trying to, minimize the risk, minimize the downside versus exploring the upside. So I would say that's the first thing, is marketing people starting to look at what is the upside of this affiliate thing? Like obviously I've heard about it in the B2C world, but it's kind of this newer thing to B2B. And so I see a lot of marketing people lean into what we talked about, the ability to see scale, the ability to test, the ability to experiment, the ability to drive these ratios, acquisition ratios that are far more efficient than other channels they're running. It's one of the only true like performance-based channels that's left. So there's a lot of exploration happening there, which I think is very exciting. So that's kind of one thing. The other is this realization from marketers of, I've been trying so hard to get the attention of a certain audience, a certain ICP. I'm investing a ton into intent data. I'm investing a ton into, building out account maps and, running different experiments through all of these ad channels. Wait a minute, these partnerships people have all these great relationships with folks that have that audience. They're already talking to them. They have the trust of them. Let's just go over, whether it's virtually or in the office, let's just go talk to these partnerships folks that have these great relationships. And let's just start to talk about like, hey, how can we work together to really get out there and build pipeline? And let's remove this idea of I have a number, you have a number, direct sales has a number. It's like we are a single revenue team. And so again, it's just this great, I think, incredible marriage of two go-to-market functions. One being marketing that figured out over the past decade how to elevate themselves to a revenue conversation, elevate themselves to a board level conversation, and partnerships where they're still kind of figuring that out a little bit, work together and get there together is kind of what I'm seeing.
Hey, you're saying some key words there. I think you dropped together like 3 times in the last 90 seconds, which is obviously in the name of this show. And 2, you touched on trust, right? We're going from an era, Jared's done a really good job of explaining this. Data was the new oil, right? It was proclaimed right about that time you and I were hitting the workforce, as we were talking about, the shift in marketing. And data was the oil that fueled the shift in marketing, going from the advertising age to the performance marketing, right? Well, now we've all got data. We've all got the ability to fight over the attention and try to attract our ideal buyers. And they're flooded with information and people trying to pull them in from every which angle. Trust kind of breaks through all of that. And so a couple of things that came to mind for me as you were talking there, Tyler, is marketers kind of stepping past that bad taste in their mouth or negative connotation with affiliate. I think in B2B, there's a lot of opportunity. We've talked on this show with folks like Arthur Castillo and Nick Bennett in the opportunity with B2B brands to work with niche influencers and content creators. And in some of those conversations, they've approached them like, hey, here's kind of the rev share model, this sort of stuff. But they're not doing the things where you could take some of the performance-based and very, transparent numbers of how you would work with 5,000 affiliates to how you would work with 5 influencers or 5 content creators. I think there's a lot of opportunity there of where influencer marketing meets affiliate marketing that come together in a way that actually works for B2B, that works, that leans on the trust of those niche creators. Maybe it's a smaller group, but we're using the tracking like we would in a bigger scaled up affiliate program. And then the other thing you were talking about is like marketers going, well, why don't we just talk to the partnership folks who have the relationships? It was like 2-3 months into my head of partnerships role at Teamwork where I was overlapping a little bit with the marketing team. And they're like, oh yeah, this person is in charge of customer stories, really trying to find some more. And I'm like, I've been on calls with 3, 4, 5 different customers a day, trying to find out which one of those could we turn into a solution partner. I'm like, 100% of those could be customer stories. Like why, and why aren't we, doing that? And that's because historically it's been a little bit siloed. Like partnerships is over here building relationships. Marketing is looking at doing the things that scale. But what we're not realizing is that when you bring those two together, you can actually add a lot of fuel to the fire to what both departments are actually trying to achieve, coming together. And how do we hit the number? How do we drive success for the organization, not just our department?
We're all working. We are all working to achieve a goal. And that is a goal to help grow a business that employs us. The people that go furthest in their careers are the ones that step outside of their function and just think about, we have limited chips to place. I think we should place them over here, even though that isn't in my technical function as it's defined. And so I think if both marketers can think that way, partnerships people can think that way, sales people can think that way, all of a sudden, everybody's going to start to realize that this partnerships group is hanging on to something that everybody across the organization can tap into. We just got to remove whatever egos we might have. We got to break down that silo. And we just got to think, like, where is the best place to make the bet, to place our chips for the company? And you're almost always going to come back to some semblance of looping partnerships in.
Very great spot to round out the conversation today, Tyler. Is said better than I could myself. For folks who are new to you, the PartnerStack team, want to make sure if they've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, they can stay connected with you. What would be the best way to go about doing that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm always willing to give up my email, tyler@partnerstack.com, or just find me on LinkedIn, Tyler Calder. Always happy to chat, get into the weeds a little bit more. Love this stuff.
I love it. Shout out to a few members of the PartnerStack team I've worked with, Jordana and Adam on the team. I have thoroughly enjoyed working with them, enjoyed the fact that Jared and Isaac connected the two of us to be able to have this conversation. And I just want to wrap it up with calling out what you said there at the end, Tyler. People who look beyond just their department, go further in their career. We see that, and it aligns completely with the tagline of the show that we've touched on in this conversation, and that is that we're going further, faster when we're marketing together.